I'd like to introduce Noah Plotkin, and I think he's going to inform us about some pretty interesting activity that he's detected across some CDNs. So please let's put your hands together and welcome Noah to the stage.
Thank you, everyone. Hello, my name is Noah Plotkin, and I'm a solutions engineer at SilentPush. And I'm really thrilled to be here today to discuss one of the most intriguing and complex investigations we've worked on, our research into what we call Triad Nexus. At the center of this investigation is Funnel CDN, a Chinese content delivery network that is far from ordinary. While it appears to operate as a legitimate provider, our research uncovered that it is deeply embedded in enabling criminal operations, hosting scams, phishing campaigns, and infrastructure linked to money laundering. What makes this story so compelling is the layers of mystery surrounding Funnel. As we uncovered more about its operations, we really found ourselves asking bigger questions like, who's really behind this network? Are they merely hosting these criminal activities, or are they actively orchestrating them as well? The more we dug, the more complex and fascinating the story really became, and raising as many questions as it did answer. Throughout the presentation, I'll share not just what we've uncovered, but also why Funnel represents a broader challenge for the industry and an opportunity for future collaboration and research. Before we dive in, I want to just preface with two important notes. First, this is a condensed presentation of our research, so I'll be moving quickly through some of the details. However, we've published an extensive public blog with the full report if you're interested in exploring further. The second piece is, while I'm honored to present this with you all today, this investigation was a collaborative effort, so a major shout out to my colleagues at SilentPush for their incredible work on this project. With that, we can jump in. So today we're going to do a deep dive into the role of the Funnel content delivery network in enabling cybercrime and infrastructure laundering. First, we're going to start by revisiting a significant event that really brought Funnel back onto the focus this year and onto our radar, specifically a supply chain attack involving the polyfill.io domain, which brought attention to the mysterious entity behind Funnel, the ACB group, which we'll talk a little bit about. Then we'll discuss how Funnel has been hosting investment scams and pig butchering websites for years now, and really how we went about mapping their infrastructure in detail. Next, I'll show how Funnel segments its network using CNAME records. This segmentation reveals the specific criminal schemes their clients are running, providing insight into their operations. After that, we'll look at the gambling sites that we uncovered and suspected money laundering activities, highlighting connections to Tether and Telegram coordination. I'll also share some findings from a retail phishing scam targeting dozens of major brands. And finally, we'll wrap with a summary, open questions, and really highlight the importance of collaboration in tackling a complex threat like Funnel. Before we dive into the actual details of Funnel, I want to take a step back and introduce a concept that we refer to as infrastructure laundering. Infrastructure laundering is the practice of actors hiding their malicious activities behind the credibility of legitimate hosting providers like AWS or Microsoft. The concept is similar to money laundering. Just as money laundering disguises illicit funds to make them appear legitimate, infrastructure laundering uses trusted cloud services to mask criminal operations. This approach is highly effective because these platforms host a mix of legitimate businesses alongside malicious activity. As we know, blocking an entire AWS IP range to stop one criminal operation, for instance, could inadvertently disrupt thousands of legitimate businesses. So throughout this presentation, we'll really see how Funnel exemplifies this concept of infrastructure laundering, hiding in plain sight within large cloud ecosystems to evade detection and maintain an air of legitimacy. Our goal is to raise awareness about this practice and explore its implications through the lens of our research on Funnel CDN, really just as a case study. So our story starts with the polyfill.io supply chain attack, which some of you all might be familiar with. Back in February of 2024, Funnel acquired the domain polyfill.io. Polyfill was a legacy JavaScript product that was embedded into hundreds of thousands of the biggest websites, from NASA and other government websites to Hulu and all types of enterprise sites. But within months of the domain being sold, some security companies started to flag that they had turned this access into a supply chain attack. Specifically, they were redirecting certain visitors on mobile devices to low-quality casino websites. Eventually, this was all resolved by Namecheap taking down the domain, which broke all the connections, essentially ending the attack. But our ears immediately perked up when we heard funnel because this was a CDN that we'd previously come across. We'd originally thought that it was just a CDN with low standards, but now we're getting some details that indicate that funnel may not just be a suspect CDN, they may actually have some degree of involvement in malicious activity themselves. So we started to do really a deep dive into who is funnel. Some other teams have produced some great research and similar research on this as well. But basically a group called ACB Group is the parent owner of Funnel, along with a series of gambling organizations that are all based out of China. And so this started to raise a lot of questions around how is this money being passed from the parent company to the subsidiaries, and how and why are they acquiring this type of Western infrastructure? We continued to dig into this because seeing Funnel redirect users to gambling websites and then seeing that Funnel's parent company is involved in the gambling sector, we needed to better understand how deep are they entwined with the gaming industry and really what does that entail. And as you can see in the screenshot here, we came across some marketing for the Funnel CDN on this site that's essentially an information hub for the online gaming industry, which really confirmed for us that their operations are based out of China. There was some dispute around that. And then that they're also actively marketing themselves within the online gambling space. So at this point, we started to say, okay, what's that holistic look? We know that what they're currently doing, but what have we seen from them historically? So we dug back into our archives, revisited some of the research we'd worked on in 2022 around a pig butchering campaign we had been tracking, part of which had been hosted on Funnel, which is why this is something that really stood out to us when we first saw that polyfill supply chain attack. What we started to realize was they weren't just this entity that was part of this redirect supply chain attack, though. They'd also been hosting some sites associated with various investment scams and job scams. Now, when we first came across this campaign in 2022, there were thousands of active domains hosted on Funnel CDN. So we began retesting all of these sites and actually found that there were some sites from the pig butchering campaign in 2022 that were still live in 2024. And something just worth noting on this is that what this essentially means is that the organizations who could have been helping to take this down or complaining about this either didn't notice that these existed, or the complaints were unsuccessful. In our opinion, it's almost certainly the latter, given we'd been in communication with these organizations about these fake sites. But one example of a site that was still active from 2022 is this site in the screenshot on the right here, impersonating CME Group. For those unfamiliar, this is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which is a global exchange for trading futures and options on different assets like commodities, currencies, interest rates, and other financial products. This is really one of the key moments in our investigation, though, because now we had a domain that's been alive for multiple years. And what that allowed us to do is to start to map changes in their infrastructure between 2022 and 2024. So by understanding more about how one site moves across Funnel, it can really give us more details about how this network works, how their clients may operate, and how they make money. So it really starts to give us that background needed for answering the all-important question that we started with is, who is Funnel? So through this analysis, we realized that Funnel was using CNAME chains as a method to obscure their infrastructure. We're going to go more in depth on this. So just by way of a refresher for anyone who might need it, CNAME records are a type of DNS record that map one domain to another, acting as an alias. They're often used to redirect traffic, simplify domain management, or in this case, mask the underlying infrastructure of a service. And as we can see in the image here, when they first launched this, they were using funnel.vip. Then that switched over to funnel01.vip. And then when we had published this research, it had switched to fn03.vip. And when we saw this, we really started to appreciate that this is not normal behavior. Most legitimate networks aren't changing the domains they use for CNAME mapping or creating variations of their own name. It's fairly odd, which of course made this even more compelling to keep digging into. So we started to ask, okay, what else can we get from these CNAME chains? This is obviously how Funnel is mapping some of their client sites and keeping them online. And we discovered that if we took that CNAME that they had mapped to their client domains and then did a forward lookup on that for their IPs that were mapped to that CNAME, we could actually get the list of the IPs that were hosting any one piece of content. And this is when we started to realize that many different ASNs were showing up here. And we could see that in the screenshot on the right here. That's a really unusual situation because normal web hosts like the Amazons, the Microsofts, the DigitalOceans typically use geographic ASNs based on the location of a client's server. They usually assign an ASN in that region for hosting and implement edge networks with various configurations. But in this case, what Funnel is doing is quite different. They have random IPs mapped to ASNs all over the world. When a user requests the site, the CNAME chain in the DNS is triggered, and the closest IP to the user's location serves the content. When we started to parse through all of this, we discovered that some of the IPs that Funnel had rented were actually owned by major Western hosting providers. And this is really where that concept of infrastructure laundering starts to become apparent, and we'll see more of this throughout the presentation. So this graphic on the right helps visualize this concept where they take the customer's host name, they map it to any one of these CNAMEs, and then those CNAMEs are mapped to one other level of CNAMEs, and then finally those CNAMEs are mapped to a huge pool of IP addresses that they're renting from other major providers. And as you begin to understand how everything is mapped together and realize that this isn't a traditional setup, it starts to raise those red flags about what is actually happening here. And at this point, we've identified the IPs they're using and all the CNAME chains, allowing us to uncover all their customer domains. This is really the effort that led to the identification of hundreds of thousands of domains generated using domain generation algorithms, as well as millions of associated records created since we began tracking them. Given the scope of how extensive this network is, we realized it was important to understand how they are selecting their clients and how clients are choosing Funnel. By examining some of their public details, we discovered that this network is almost specifically designed and marketed for bulk hosting, offering significant discounts to clients with 50 or more domains. Additionally, just through analyzing the CNAME chains, we observed that many of their clients appeared to be taking advantage of the bulk hosting option. One thing just to note, as people are researching this, or if you have interest in trying to map Funnel on your own for various use cases, is that they do have a really consistent error message page, which we found very useful during the mapping process. In our case, we used an HTML body SSD hash, but there are a few other ways that you can map these error pages as well. But by tracking this one page, you can see all of the IPs they're hosting, get a lot more context about the ASNs they're hosting these on, and it will also give you a gut check for any investigation where you think you may be investigating an IP that's being hosted by Funnel. Specifically, you can navigate to domains on it or the IP itself, and eventually you'll come across that there are some unmapped and have this error page. So as we started to map where these clients were hosting their infrastructure, what was on them, and how the CNAME chains worked, we better understood the process by which Funnel was mapping IP space from both major Western providers along with Chinese hosting providers. This blended hosting is really interesting because it highlights how they're using legitimate infrastructure to obscure the malicious activity that's being hosted, making detection and mitigation really challenging, not to mention the jurisdictional complexities this presents for any potential takedown attempts. We refer to this practice as infrastructure laundering, but the simplest way to think about it again is Funnel is a web host that is going out and bulk purchasing IPs from major Western providers, providing an obfuscation layer for their activities. And we believe that this really is a strategy that we'll continue to see among some Chinese criminal actors and other suspect hosting providers. This is really just one example wherein by renting IP space and allocating it to their criminal clients, they've managed to maintain persistence for over 2 years in certain cases. So as we began analyzing the content that's being hosted on Funnel, we discovered tens of thousands of casino websites. We spent quite a bit of time investigating these sites, and we were particularly interested in the presence of some well-known casino brands with controversial histories tied to organized crime and money laundering. The Sun City Group, which is shown in the top right corner, is one such example of that. The presence of these brands really started to raise some big questions. Mainly, were these organizations complicit, or were their names and logos being misused? Initially, we assumed the former, that Funnel was collaborating with these casino brands as part of a money laundering effort, but we'll see that that was later challenged. But what we came to quickly realize, though, is that many of these sites were very similar, and so it raised even more red flags, right? How come two separate brands would have the exact same bonus offer on their website with the exact same graphics? You can see that in the screenshots here with the little tether pop-ups on both Sun City and the Bet365 sites. And this was a consistent finding across many of the sites. So we also realized, though, that some of their code actually appears to be the same, too. So we'd set up a query that allowed us to search all these casino websites using a combination of the reference JavaScript files and the HTML content, the HTML titles, the software that was being used to serve the HTTP response, the ASNs, and then also the favicon values for the casino brands. I'll just note that this is obviously being conducted in the Silent Push platform, but this can be done using a combination of the appropriate DNS and web scanning data as well. And this was really, though, the first indication that there was maybe one single developer behind all of these sites. And this is when we started to lean towards the idea that either Funnel itself or one of Funnel's clients were doing this. We actually took this finding, shared it with a reporter at TechCrunch, and as a result, one of the casino companies, bwin, actually confirmed that the site that we had uncovered, in this case, was fraudulent and had no affiliation with their legitimate operators. So this kind of challenged our earlier assumption that these casino websites might be legitimate entities, complicit in a larger money laundering effort. We started pouring into the source code of these fraudulent casino sites and discovered that many of them referenced a GitHub account. This was another crucial finding because it confirmed that these sites were built using shared templates and common code. And these sites all referenced this public repository, and within that repository, we found all the different templates used to create the suspect gambling sites we had come across. Based on the repository's content and the level of customization observed across these sites, we believe that the individual or team maintaining this repository is likely working for Funnel, either directly or in some sort of contracted role, specifically actively building web pages on Funnel to support various criminal schemes. So as we continued to dig deeper into this repository, we came across a particularly revealing page. What we're seeing here, this page contained a specific phrase in Mandarin commonly associated with money laundering operations. And what made this even more significant were the links embedded within this page, direct connections to various Telegram channels and email addresses. And this really provided some clear evidence that this might be more than just a collection of fraudulent sites. Instead, this might be part of a larger organized money-moving network. As we began going through those Telegram channels from that page, a clearer picture of the operation started to emerge here. As seen in the messages here, they were not only coordinating these operations, but were openly bragging about this money-moving network that they're operating. We'd also found some examples where the operators were explicitly listing all the casino brands they've been tracking, that we've been tracking throughout this research. And the messages essentially served as advertisements, inviting participants to join what they called a running points team. This is a term often associated with money laundering operations where participants deposit funds that are then moved through the various channels to other locations. And in this case, they're advertising those fraudulent casino branded websites as the source. This discovery, though, really reinforced that Funnel, or at least one of its clients, is not only hosting this infrastructure, but is also actively promoting these brands as part of a coordinated money laundering effort. This operation really closely aligns to some other well-documented money laundering schemes, which often rely on a combination of fake infrastructure, fraudulent brands, and coordinated networks to move and obscure funds. For the sake of time, I won't go into the details of the parallels here, but it's important just to note that this is not an isolated effort. So we continued to do a deep dive on all of the sites being hosted on Funnel and uncovered a significant cluster of infrastructure supporting retail phishing websites, targeting over 20 major retail and luxury brands. What was most shocking here, though, is that all these domains, both corporate phishing pages and investment scams, were all hosted on one specific Funnel CNAME. Quite literally an entire CNAME dedicated to criminal phishing and investment scam schemes. So not only does this mean that it would have been easy for Funnel to see this, take it all down, it also becomes clear that Funnel likely helped set all of this up for this particular client. And then consistent with our other findings, again, the retail phishing scams are hosted across 9 different ASNs, spanning both Chinese and Western providers. This aligns with that broader pattern of infrastructure laundering we've observed, where actors leverage a mix of legitimate and suspect hosting providers to obscure activities. By distributing their operations across multiple ASNs, Funnel makes it far more challenging to track and disrupt their infrastructure. Hosting on Western providers in particular adds an additional layer of legitimacy to their operations, really making it much more difficult to block this type of traffic without any collateral damage. And really, again, Funnel is just one use case here, or study, or kind of example of the effectiveness of this broader concept of infrastructure laundering. So as we wrap here, it's really just important to acknowledge that while our research has uncovered significant details about Funnel, many critical questions still remain unanswered. These open questions are really key to understanding the full scope of Funnel's operations and their broader implications. Mainly, what has been the financial impact of Funnel's operations? How is it that these online gambling sites have stayed online while abusing prominent brand names? One of the more compelling questions, in my opinion, who is ultimately behind this massive network? Are there other CDNs that are operating in a similar manner? A few others as well here, but really to summarize the presentation here, Funnel CDN, or Triad Nexus, as we've termed the large cluster of infrastructure associated with this investigation, has been a hub for global fraud, with its infrastructure directly supporting pig butchering, retail fishing, and online gambling operations since 2022. This investigation not only maps their infrastructure, but also raises critical questions about how we, as an industry, can start to address infrastructure laundering and dismantle these networks effectively. I thank you so much for your time and attention. It's truly been an honor to be here and share all of this with you.